Joining us now, a key voice on national security, the House Oversight Committee Chairman, Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz of Utah. Congressman, before we begin, I want you to listen to this little excerpt. This is the President of the United States. He just sat down with Jeff Mason, the White House correspondent for the Reuters news agency, and made a strong defense of his posture when it comes to these negotiations with Iran on its nuclear program.
What's the best way to ensure that Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon? Prime Minister Netanyahu thinks that the best way to do that is either through doubling down on more sanctions or through military action, ensuring that Iran has absolutely no enrichment capabilities whatsoever. And there's no expert on Iran or nuclear proliferation around the world that seriously thinks Iran is going to respond to additional sanctions by eliminating its nuclear program. What we've said from the start is organizing a strong sanctions regime globally. What we can do is bring Iran to the table. And by bringing Iran to the table, force them to have a serious negotiation in which, A, we are able to see exactly what's going on inside of Iran, B, we're able to create what we call a breakout period, a timeline, where we know if they were to try to get a nuclear weapon, it would take them a certain amount of time. And the deal that we're trying to negotiate is to make sure that there's at least a year between us seeing them try to get a nuclear weapon and them actually being able to obtain one. And as long as we've got that one-year breakout capacity, that ensures us that we can take military action to stop them if they were to stop it.
All right, the president really going into specific details, making the case why his posture is superior, better in the long term than the posture put forward by the Israeli Prime Minister. Congressman, your reaction?
I don't think we can ever take the chance that Iran is able to achieve a nuclear weapon. They want death and destruction to Israel. They have sent terrorists who have come after us and killed thousands of Americans along the way. There is no daylight. There is no daylight between our position and what Israel's position is on this. We have not taken a hard enough stance, and I don't think the president has seen any visibility into what's going on into Iran. We've heard that from outside experts, and I don't think we know internally what is really happening there, other than their determination, Iran's, to have death and destruction to Israel and to the United States.
But he says that there's really no serious alternative right now to these negotiations because the other options simply won't work. I'll play another excerpt from this interview he just granted to Reuters.
But if they do agree to it, it would be far more effective in controlling their nuclear program than any military action we could take, any military action Israel could take, and far more effective than sanctions will be.
So what's wrong with giving these negotiations at least a chance of success?
I still think we could put more sanctions in place. I do think that puts them in a crippling position. I think the price of oil also has a devastating effect to the economy there. But I do not want to rule out a military use of force.
He's not ruling that out. He's not ruling out. He says he's not even sure that this negotiation is going to work. What he says is give it a chance. If it doesn't work, there always is the option to go back to more sanctions, and there always is the option, last resort, for military force.
I think Congress needs to have visibility on that. I don't think they should make such a big brouhaha about the fact that the Prime Minister from Israel is coming to the United States to talk to Congress. You know, when your friends come to town, they come see you. And he's done this in the past. And for him to treat the Prime Minister of Israel like this, it's pretty embarrassing.
But it's only 2 weeks tomorrow to the day, 2 weeks before the Israeli election, and he says it would be inappropriate, no matter how close of an ally, to get involved in domestic Israeli politics, especially at a time when Netanyahu is facing a severe challenge right now. He might not get himself reelected this time.
It is appropriate, though, for the Prime Minister to come to speak to Congress. I'm proud that Speaker Boehner invited him. I think it was the right thing to do, and I look forward to a broad bipartisan support in favor of the Prime Minister of Israel. We are very united in our support for Israel.
I want you to listen to what he says. This is the President of the United States, once again, from this exclusive interview he granted to Reuters, to Jeff Mason, the White House correspondent for Reuters. Listen to this.
When we first announced this interim deal, Prime Minister Netanyahu made all sorts of claims. This was going to be a terrible deal. This was going to result in Iran getting $50 billion worth of relief. Iran would not abide by the agreement. None of that has come true. This is not a personal issue. I think that it is important for every country in its relationship with the United States to recognize that the U.S. has a process of making policy. And although we have separation of powers, ultimately the interaction with foreign governments runs through the executive branch. That's true whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president, and that's true regardless of how close the ally is.
Don't you think, with hindsight, and you're a smart guy, with hindsight, it would have been more appropriate for the Speaker of the House to at least have informed the White House or the Democratic leadership, you know what I'm going to do? I know he's got an election coming up. I don't know if the Speaker actually knew that he had an election coming up, but he's got an election. But I think it's important at this critical moment to give the Prime Minister of Israel a chance to make his case to the American Congress. With hindsight, don't you think the Speaker should have at least had the courtesy to tell the White House what he was planning on doing?
Well, I think he did do that. I think
only after the invitation was delivered.
We're talking about semantics of.
It's not semantics. This is a serious issue, Congressman.
We're a co-equal branch of government here, Wolf.
But as a matter of courtesy, why wouldn't the Speaker of the House at least tell the President?
Get over it. He's going to come here and speak to the joint session.
We know that. We know he's speaking tomorrow. I'm looking back. I'm not looking ahead. I'm looking back. With hindsight, was it a miscalculation?
No, I don't think it's a miscalculation. I think Speaker Boehner did the right thing.
But don't you think it's hurt U.S.-Israeli relations?
No. What you're going to see.
When 30 Democrats decide to boycott the visit of the Prime Minister to the U.S. Congress, doesn't that hurt the U.S.-Israeli relationship?
There's 535 members between the House and the Senate. And so, yeah, you have a couple that are not going to show up, which I think is a broad mistake in the context. Remember, it was just our embassy in Yemen that we had to flee because the Houthis were coming to take over, supported by Iran. Iran has not been a friendly player. You saw the video out there in the Arabian Sea where they're blowing up a would-be Gulf carrier there for us. This is not a regime that we can continue to appease and give them what they want more than anything else, which is time. And President Obama has given the Iranians time, and that's what I worry about.
But you also worry about another war between the United States and Iran.
The biggest problem that we have on the face of the planet is Iran getting a nuclear weapon. And we have to do anything and everything we can do in our powers to make sure that that doesn't happen.
So you would support a preemptive strike against their nuclear
Absolutely.
facilities?
We negotiate from a position of strength, Wolf. We do not do this through appeasement and bickering about what time the Speaker called the President to say that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to show up. That is a distraction. I think the President miscalculated on that. Get over it. He's coming to speak to us, and we look forward to hearing
from him. So you think the U.S. should basically say to Iran right now, either completely open up, stop all of your nuclear program, or the United States is going to launch a preemptive strike?
If it was up to me, if I was the President of the United States, I would take out that threat. You have to deal with it in a realistic thing. We believe them. When they say they want death and destruction in the United States, when the Ayatollah himself says that in November of last year, believe him. When he says it to the United States of America and the Houthis are coming in and kicking us out of our embassy and they're going to take us out, believe him. Yes, you take out that threat.
Congressman, we have more to talk about. I'm glad you're telling us how you really feel right now. These are critically important issues, as you and I well know.